Nanda emerged from the temple, as though she had not just crossed the boundary between life and legend. She paused, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the glare of the harsh sunlight. The scarab nestled close to her heart. Perfect, she thought with a snort. I pass a few divine tests, and now I'm a walking talisman. The desert unfolded before her in endless waves of golden sand, but something had shifted again. Time felt fragile, as if she could now pluck at it like a loose thread on a tapestry. She stretched, muscles tight from the trials, and exhaled a long breath, pushing the strange sense of power into the background. It wasn't just any power. It was the power to guide time itself, to shape destinies. Not like that's intimidating at all, she muttered to herself, glancing down at her paws. The golden sheen of the scarab pulsed slightly, as if reminding her of its presence. The gods had been clear. The scarab wasn't for controlling time, but for understanding it, guiding it with the lightest touch. Yet Nanda wasn't one for light touches. She was a cat who preferred decisiveness. The balance of time, however, didn't care about preferences. It demanded subtlety and patience, two things she had never been known for. So basically, she thought, I've been handed the universe's most fragile piece of thread and told not to tangle it. Her eyes scanned the horizon. The city lay beyond the dunes, its silhouette shimmering in the heat, but Nanda's sharp instincts told her it wasn't the same city she had left behind. The winds whispered strange things now. Change had already begun. She felt it in the air and the tremor beneath her paws. The gods had warned her. The balance of time was delicate. Every step she took could tip it further out of control. No pressure, she thought with a swift flick of her ear. A noise behind her caught her attention, and she turned to see Veruschka stumbling toward her. Her clothes torn, face streaked with sweat and dirt. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and her steps were unsteady, but her eyes lit up with relief as soon as they met Nanda's. Nanda. Her voice cracked with exhaustion and emotion, but there was a fierce edge of determination in it. Nanda watched with her usual calm, as Veruschka collapsed to her knees beside her. I thought I'd lost you, she managed between breaths. Nanda sat back on her haunches, surveying her coolly. I'm not that easy to lose, she replied, her tone dry but a hint of amusement in her eyes. You look like you've been chasing ghosts, or something you really shouldn't. Veruschka let out a short, breathless laugh, though it sounded more like a groan. You could say that. Nanda tilted her head slightly, a flicker of concern crossing her mind despite her calm exterior. Veruschka's clothes were ragged, and a nasty gash marred her arm, blood trickling down into the sand. You look like you've been through a war, she observed, her tone shifting to something more serious. Veruschka glanced down at the wound, as if noticing it for the first time. It's not just me. Nanda, things are worse than I thought. She winced, pressing her hand to the cut. The city, it's falling apart. There's a sickness spreading. People are dying. The priests say it's a curse, something about the balance of time being disturbed. Nanda's ears flattened in irritation. A curse? Of course. Humans and their curses. She sat up straighter, her sharp gaze locking onto Veruschka's. And let me guess, they think I'm behind it. Veruschka nodded grimly. They're scared, Nanda, they think. Well, they think you've brought this upon them. That bypassing the trials, you've somehow angered the gods. Nanda stared at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Of course they do, she said, her voice tinged with dry amusement despite the gravity of the situation. Because clearly, I've had nothing better to do than start a city-wide epidemic. Veruschka's brow furrowed, her eyes searching for reassurance. This isn't funny, Nanda. People are dying. The pharaoh's grip on the city is slipping, and there's talk of rebellion. They believe the gods have abandoned them. Nanda turned her gaze back to the horizon, her mind racing. The scarab gave a little shock to her chest, a quiet reminder of its power. Great. I pass a few divine tests, and the whole world starts falling apart. Typical. She took a deep breath, letting her senses stretch out, feeling the ebb and flow of time around her. Something had gone wrong, clearly. But was it her fault? She had completed the trials, and then some. Hadn't she earned this power? Yet power always came with consequences. The gods had warned her. Time was not something to be toyed with. And now, it seemed her actions had tipped the scales in ways she hadn't anticipated. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind swept across the dunes, carrying with it the faint scent of the city and the weight of unspoken tension. What do we do? Veruschka's voice was quiet, almost resigned. Nanda blinked, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. We? She repeated. I thought this was my mess to clean up. Veruschka didn't back down. I was with you from near the beginning, Nanda. I'm not leaving now. Her voice was steady, despite the fear in her eyes. Nanda studied her for a moment, her gaze sharp and unreadable. Despite everything, Veruschka was still here, tired, injured, but loyal. She hadn't asked for that. She didn't need it. Yet, there she was. Humans, always so stubborn. Seems to be a cat lady too, and always knows where to score the best kibble. Fine, she said, allowing a small smile to curl the edges of her mouth. But don't expect me to thank you for it. Veruschka managed a tired grin. Wouldn't dream of it. Nanda stood tall and began to pace. We need to figure out where the timeline went wrong, she mused aloud, more to herself than to Veruschka. Something shifted. Something I did or didn't do. The sickness, the rebellion. It's all connected. The scarab. It's not giving me all the answers, but I can feel it. There's a thread we need to pull. We just have to find it. Veruschka wiped the sweat from her brow, her eyes following Nanda as she moved. So where do we start? Nanda stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing as she thought it through. We start with the city. We see how far the sickness has spread. Then, we find ground zero. Somewhere in the past, a decision was made, or not made, that's causing this. Veruschka nodded, her resolve hardening. The city's in chaos, but I know the back routes. We can get in without being seen. Nanda's tail flicked in approval. Good. Let's hope we don't end up on any wanted posters. She started walking toward the city, her pace brisk, but her mind still raced. She hadn't asked for any of this burden of power. She had just wanted answers. But now, she was responsible for far more than her own fate. The balance of time, the lives of the people in that city, it was all tied to her. Veruschka fell into step beside her, her breathing still ragged, but her determination clear. She glanced at Nanda, and for a moment, the silence between them felt loaded with unspoken thoughts. You okay? She asked, her voice soft but concerned. Nanda glanced up at Veruschka, her green eyes gleaming with mild, somewhat inappropriate humor. Yet there was something deeper there, something unspoken. Veruschka, she said with a faint smile, I'm a cat who can manipulate time. I'm never really okay. Veruschka chuckled, but the tension in her voice was still evident. Fair enough. As they neared the city, the weight of what lay ahead settled heavily on both of them. Nanda, however, was resolute. Her sharp instincts, and even sharper mind, had carried her through worse. She couldn't predict the future, but there was another thing she knew for sure. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. And for the first time since leaving that temple, that thought didn't seem quite so overwhelming.